Hello, this is Father George Williams, and welcome to our next webinar for the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition. We are privileged today to have two guests to be speaking about reentry programs that they've started. Our first speaker is Sister Maureen Clarke. Now, Sister Maureen is a Sister of St. Joseph. I've known her for over 30 years. She was the chaplain at MCI Norfolk in Massachusetts when I was starting as a novice, and so she was one of my first mentors as a prison chaplain. And since that time, for the last 30 years, she's worked as a Catholic chaplain at MCI-Framingham, which is Massachusetts prison for women. She's won many awards over her years and her great service to the women at Framingham, including a honorary doctorate from Fairfield University. And since 1995, she's been the coordinator of the Aftercare Program for women who are preparing to leave prison. And the Aftercare Program seeks to help, in their words, help one woman at a time regain her life by offering assistance and resources that reconnect women returning home from prison to their families and their communities. Now, Dustin Feddon Father Dustin Feddon is a priest of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, and he's the executive director of Joseph House. And Joseph House is a new reentry program for men work in North Florida, and their goal is to serve those most affected by mass incarceration. Father Dustin also serves as a priest at St. Elizabeth and Seton Parish and Sacred Heart in Lamarck Village in the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. He does a lot of work in the local prisons, pastoral ministry in North Florida, and he focuses especially on those in solitary confinement. His new program, St. Joseph House, is a nonprofit ministry of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, and it offers a range of services for men and women leaving prison to support their complete restoration and return to their communities. So I'm going to ask Sister Maureen first to describe her program, and then Father Dustin his, and then at the same time, anyone listening and watching is welcome to send in some comments or questions via either the chat or the Q&A feature, which if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see on your computer. So Maureen, starting with you, would you describe how you started this program and what have been some of the things that were both obstacles and learning experiences, and where does it stand these days?
Sure. Well, the Aftercare Program began because before I moved to Massachusetts, I did prison work in Pennsylvania. And for 13 years, I heard women come back telling me that the reason they were back was because nothing had changed out there. They left very positive. They felt like they received help when they were in the prison, but it wasn't enough. They felt so alone. They felt a lot of fear. They didn't have employment. They didn't have housing. They couldn't feel stable. But mainly, they felt so alone. So having heard that for how many years, when I moved to Massachusetts, that was one of the first things I did. I worked in a reentry program at Norfolk Prison, and it was called Fresh Start. 2 years later, I moved to the women's prison, and again, all these years, heard the same story of how hard it was when people left prison to begin their life again. So in '95, I gathered 6 of my volunteers who helped inside and said to them, let's meet and let's figure out this aftercare. And they are still with me today. They're amazing people. And so they said to me, well, how do we do it? I said, I don't know. Together, we're going to figure it out. And so to this day, we have hundreds of people out and doing well. And the way the program works is there's no sign up. There's no sign posted in the prison to come and be a part of this program. Myself, my volunteers see people who look like they're really in earnest to have their lives be different. They hear about it from other people who are in it, and they come and ask, or we approach them. And the way the process is we explain the program to them, and then they write a letter and ask to be in the program. But the important line in that letter is, I will be willing to do everything you ask. I will attend programs. I will meet with an aftercare visitor. I will do everything in my power while in this prison and when I get out to turn my life around. So that's the piece we're looking for, that openness and willingness to want to change and to receive help. So when that happens, after they write their letter, then we assign them an aftercare visitor who comes to the prison, to the visiting room. So they're not a volunteer. They don't have the restrictions that a volunteer has. Most prisons, volunteers cannot meet with ex-inmates when they're out. They have to either work inside the prison with the inmate, or that's it. So in this program, this aftercare program, these people do not come in, the aftercare visitors do not come into the prison doing programs. They only come to the visiting room as one of their visitors. And we try to do that 6 months to a year before the person leaves. So the nice thing about it is they become friends, and they can't say anymore there was nobody there, because there is somebody there. They have a cell phone, they can get together for lunch and dinner and call people, their visitors, and really receive some direct help. The visitors will take them to their first AA meetings, NA meetings. You know, the whole part of this program is to network with the community so that they don't experience that aloneness. And the visitors are these phenomenal people who, you know, I say to them, can you just, it's almost like adopt a person that you're willing to be a friend with. And all but really one person in all these years, it hasn't worked. And it was because they wouldn't listen to the rules and regulations that the aftercare visitors set up for themselves. So that's pretty much how it works. We have programs inside. If they've signed up to be in the program, they meet one-to-one weekly for spiritual direction. They meet one-to-one for pastoral counseling. They attend the programs we have, like Countdown to Freedom, and we do Read to Me, Mommy. We do anything we can to reconnect people in the prison with their families, friends, support network. So that's just a real quick run through.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think the idea of having separate groups, inside people who are regular prison volunteers, and then these outside visitors who are not part of that not part of the volunteer program, is really brilliant, because it gets away from all the problems of overfamiliarity that you run into. What kind of training do you give the visitors who do not come in as volunteers to the prison?
The aftercare visitors get together with myself, and I have 4 people that work with me. 3 of them are social workers and drug alcohol counselors, and the one is a drug alcohol counselor. Those 4 people work inside the prison with me. The aftercare visitors come once a month, every first Monday of the month, and the 5 of us are there with them. And we usually have some topic, education topic, as well as dinner together. And it's there that they receive their training. It could be on healthy relationships, it could be on issues of recovery, court system, you name it. And it's always a back and forth, having dinner and conversation together about the topic. But we also take time to go around the room. And when we do that, each person mentions who they're working with, their first name, and updates us as to what's happening with them. For example, I'm meeting with Susie. Next week, she's going to be getting out. She has a place to go, but she'll be looking for employment, and this is what her background is. Or somebody else will say, somebody that I'm working with is getting out, and she has nothing. She has an apartment to go to, but she doesn't have anything. So then the next month when we gather, it's like Christmas. People bring all the stuff that is needed for that woman, or resources on how she can get the things she needs. So yeah, it's a very powerful, powerful group of people.
And how were you able to get this through, say, the Department of Corrections? Did you run into obstacles when you were initially envisioning this program?
I did initially, but I kept, as crazy as it sounds, I kept obeying all the rules because my aftercare visitors were coming as a visitor to the visiting room and meeting with people. And at that point, it's not the same right now in our history in the Department of Corrections here. The visiting rules have changed. But up until the past 6 months or 8 months ago, anybody could come to visit somebody. You didn't have to have a list with people on that list, on that name, the names on the list. So when they changed it here in Massachusetts, I immediately went to the people who I deal with as supervisors, and the superintendent was very pleased to tell me that listing of the aftercare visitors would not be touched, that she really appreciates all that we're trying to do to help people.
Great. Okay, and having heard that program, Father Dustin, would you describe yours?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks again, George. With Joseph House is in many ways, we're at this point a very new program, a program that is, as Sister Maureen has kind of already mentioned in terms of kind of the aspirations of the work that she's doing there, is in a lot of ways kind of come about through parishioners and different parish communities and ministries here in the Tallahassee area, and also just kind of in the Panhandle here in North Florida. But a lot of this began personally for me as both a seminarian and as a priest, doing visits in prisons throughout North Florida. But particularly, it was when I was going to visit those that are in solitary confinement, and kind of witnessing and just seeing the deplorable kind of conditions that so many men, thousands and thousands of men, are inhabiting at any moment in the day, and seeing their conditions, the deprivation, the degree of isolation, it became very frustrating kind of early on, thinking, what possibly can I do for these men, not only as they are in confinement, but about 95% of these men will eventually be re-entering into society, and just seeing how kind of deprived they are of programming, of any attempt to really think constructively about their healthy, safe reintegration. So the vast majority of men that I visit with are in what some have called the prison slums. These are facilities where there are hardly any programs. There's just not much work being done. I, on a frequent basis, all too frequent, would see men in confinement, in solitary confinement, go from confinement directly to the local bus station, and then sent back to wherever in Florida it is that they are returning. And seeing that, witnessing that up kind of close and personal, I, along with a few others, began to think very seriously about what we can do as a community, what we can do as parish communities, as a diocese, to provide a more safe and really more dignified transition and welcoming back into our communities here in the Panhandle. And so Joseph House began with those experiences, and we set out to really target those that we believe are the most vulnerable to recidivism and to homelessness. So this may be a little bit of a difference, just because so many of those that we are working with have had minimal access to a lot of programs. We see them leaving without many programs, so we see then already they're beginning with a deficit in having a healthy reintegration back into our communities. So we have here at Joseph House, with the support of our Bishop Bill Walk, and various other clergy, lay people, community members, non-Catholic and Catholic alike, have set out to create a space here. I'm actually here at Joseph House now, to create a space that is in a safe neighborhood, a safe area in Tallahassee. We were extremely fortunate to find a location in an area that is well integrated to the larger communities here in Tallahassee. And we set this up in a way so that it would be easily accessible for parish parishioners and other community members in Tallahassee to come in and to share meals, to share the space with those that will be residing here and those that are already residing here. So in creating Joseph House in this kind of central location, we wanted to make it easy and safe and accessible for those in our communities to be able to engage in relationships with those that we're serving. So as a new young kind of mission, just starting, we're already beginning to kind of feel our way through this to find the ways of creating not only safe space for those that are residing here, but safe space for those in our communities, ultimately so that, as Sister Maureen emphasized, we're all about networking. For me, I see this as a portal, as a kind of a transition space, as we hope that those that are coming through Joseph House can become more integrated into our communities and really build a kind of social or cultural capital here at Joseph House, and with access with some of the surrounding communities and parishes.
Great. Thank you, Dustin. I was thinking earlier too, you're working primarily with men, and Sister Maureen's program is designed for women coming out of women's prison. I think, I suspect there are a lot more programs for men in general than there are for women, because that generally is how things go in our correctional system. But I'm wondering if you could each talk about what are the unique challenges that each gender faces when he or she is getting out of prison. I imagine that they're facing different obstacles as they prepare to leave. Maureen, could we start with you?
Sure. Well, sad to say, usually the women are the sole caregiver in the family that end up in prison. And I think the statistics say something like 60% of women in state prisons have children under the age of 18. And then there's fewer prisons for women, so usually they're at a distance, and the travel situation is very, very difficult. So they're the primary caregivers, and it's difficult to keep that connection. I mentioned earlier, we do a Read to Me Mommy program for that very, very reason, where the women choose a book for their children and read it on a DVD, and we send home the new book and the DVD to the child from the mom, which has been extremely popular and copied by most of the prisons across the country. Their lives have been so disrupted when they go to prison. Since they oftentimes are the only caregiver and sole support, they've lost their jobs, they've lost family and friends, and are now in a very insecure situation. So those are some of the main difficulties that women face when they're leaving prison. And I mean, I know some of those from working at Norfolk, some of those are also similar for men, but with the women being mainly the main support and trying to get their children back, trying to get their housing back, trying to get employment back, it's so difficult.
Okay. Yeah, and I would just add, George, for men, at least from my experience just in the past 5 years, watching a lot of this happen, predominantly the men that I serve are young Black men for the most part. I would say about 80% of the men that I visit in these facilities are young and African American. And I would say the greatest challenge they face in coming out of prison is the stigma of young Black men, even middle-aged Black men, being super predators, being viewed as a threat because of the color of their skin, perhaps because of their behavior and just basic kind of everyday kind of interactions. So many, what is kind of lost in this, I think, this stigma, this stereotype, is that the vast majority of men that I visit with are, I would describe as highly traumatized individuals that were traumatized prior to coming into prison. They've been traumatized in prison, and more than likely they're experiencing another form of trauma and trying to reintegrate. So I would say it's that leads to a crisis in them being able to get housing as well as employment. It is just a stigma that not only others have, but they see and kind of feel and sense that others have of them.
Okay, well, thanks. Now, somebody has written a question, and they write, do those coming out of incarceration have job skills or professions? If not, do they get an opportunity to get some skill training, presumably before they leave? And this person is also glad to hear about networking. So Any comments on about what kind of skills do they have coming out of prison for work?
Well, that's, you know, it's so individual. Very few people come into prison with a lot of education. Until recently, where I work, Boston University offered an opportunity for people to get their degree. That has recently changed, that they can't get a degree now, they can get a certificate. There's programs in our area that really are trying to focus on job training and skill training. And there's an office that's been created by the mayor here called Office for Returning Citizens. And they are making a great effort to find resources and to provide opportunities for people to get new skills and job training. For myself, I've connected with a lawyer up here who is interested and has 1 year worked with me on beginning an entrepreneurship program, knowing that people coming out of prison, it's very hard. People don't want to hire an ex-con. And so what would it be like if they had job skills like this person is asking, or at least a dream of what they would love to do? You know, maybe they were a beautician, or, you know, they don't mind cleaning houses and they'd like to start their own business doing something like that. So this lawyer has chosen to do programs for a semester long at Boston College. And if the person's chosen, they get to go to classes every Monday through the whole semester. And at the end of that semester, they present their dream of their program where they can be self-employed and employ other people who also are looking for jobs. And they present that program to people who the professor gathers together who are interested in trying to help people coming out of prison. So it's really a wonderful opportunity.
Does that program at Boston College have a name or a title?
I don't know that he's given it a name yet, but it's at a Boston College Law School.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think he's just called it the Entrepreneurship Program.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Dustin? What would you say to that question about job skills and networking?
Yeah, you know, again, just the realities of the environment here is there's not much opportunities for the bulk of those that I serve in the high maximum security prisons that I go into for job training, for skill enhancement. There's a great need. A lot of this is just because we're deprogrammed, defunded, understaffed, swelling large, you know, facilities. And, you know, something Sister Maureen said, and this is for us, I think this is in conversations I've had with the folks here at Joseph House, what we aspire to do and what we've already started to do is emphasizing this space in Joseph House, but also the relationship building with parishioners and other people in the community, is to allow these men, oftentimes the first time, to really dream about what they want to do with their life, to give them a space, because for us, this is Joseph House is rent-free. We do not anticipate them getting a job within the first 2 or 3 months so that they can focus on their own emotional and internal needs. And during that time, we want to allow for a kind of skill assessment program and also just in conversation and skill groups, and also with through therapy as well and counseling services, for the men to be able to begin to really think about their vocations in life. I've asked guys in prison on numerous occasions what they would like to do, and if they were to be able to go to the university, what would they study? And I've had inmate after inmate tell me that they've never been asked that question before. So that tells me that it's, for us, it's more about offering up an opportunity, a space and kind of time for them to really dream.
Okay, now a few people have called in some questions. One person asked if you've noticed a difference between those in jail and in prison. I know, Maureen, you're working with women who are in the state prison, but I know both of you have encountered people in the past who have been in jail. And what about jail people getting out of jail? Is there anything going on with them in your programs?
Well, like I mentioned before, in the city of Boston, this returning citizens program is open for anybody who's been in jail or prison to go there as introduce themselves, and then they provide a variety of services for them. I see also somebody's asking about how many people do we serve. Like I said, we have hundreds of people in our program. The crazy thing about it, the Aftercare Program, it's actually Sisters of St. Joseph Aftercare Program. It's not a prison program run by the prison. It's run by the Sisters of St. Joseph Aftercare volunteers and visitors. The crazy thing we did in our program is we have no cutoff. So if we take you into the program and we assign you someone to work with you, which we call an aftercare visitor, then there's no cutoff. And so many of these people have been connected with us since '95, but they've become friends. And thank God they've been doing well. So to answer that, I probably inside the prison right now, we probably are working with 20, 30 people as they're in that process. And then we keep adding to that number as people leave.
Okay, and Dustin, how about you? Have
Yeah.
you worked with people in jail?
Yeah, I do, George. I mean, I do most of my visits in the prisons here, but just the reality of it, you know, some of those that we've been serving at Joseph House end up going back to jail because of violation of probation, which is a whole nother issue. And so I have to go into the jails to visit with some of our participants at Joseph House. And, you know, here in Leon County, we have 1,200 currently in the county jail. You know, and it's an interesting question and something that we're still kind of thinking through here at Joseph House. To what extent do we serve those that have never been sent to prison but spent their time predominantly in the county jail? Because one of our ongoing questions is, to what extent do we serve those that are coming in out of prison that are from the Tallahassee area? And the reason I say that is because our hope would be that we could, in serving those that we serve, that when they come to Tallahassee, that they're coming into a community that they're not familiar with, that they don't have those old, oftentimes a lot of baggage, social and familial ties, so that they can have a kind of restart in a way. It adds a whole nother layer of complications when they're just down the street from a lot of the dramas that oftentimes contributed them to their incarceration to begin with. So it's a real challenge. And the honest answer to that question is we're still not fully sure to what extent we're going to provide services and devote a lot of our attention on those that are simply coming out of the county jail back into their own local kind of communities and neighborhoods.
One of the person who asked that the person who asked the question about jail versus prison also noted that his experience has been that those who've not been to prison tend to be less serious about turning their lives around. So people say have only been in jail. Has that been your experience?
Well, it has for me. The people who I have met who've come from jail talk about there's nothing to do there. There's no programs, there's no motivation. And their eye is on getting out the door because they only have 3 weeks or 2 months or whatever to serve. So they don't really have the time that's really time for introspection and to network with other people, to do some future planning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my experience too. How about you, Father Dustin?
You know, I don't think I've had enough experience to be able to answer that, but I would suspect that given the state of our prisons, at least in Florida, in the fact that there's so few programs really offered, that might be an exception here.
Somebody asked the question, I think it's an important question, and I would love to answer this myself, but I would rather you answer it. And he writes, could you please elaborate on why it's important that aftercare volunteers do not have contact with returning citizens prior to their release? I work in a program that has some aftercare volunteers who meet and interact and get to know the returning citizens prior to release, and others that do not. This depends on facility rules. So why do you have that difference in your program?
Well, the difference in the reason we had the difference in our program was that you could not be in contact with people that you had worked with inside the prison once they got out. And it just seemed like it was very easy once my brain started to kick in. And if we can't do it, then what do we do? And what became very clear, what we do is create two groups so that we don't have that conflict, and we are trying to abide by the rules of the institution. And it's worked out well for us, actually. And when people would have a relationship with people coming out of prison, has happened, which is why they created those rules, is people would become familiar with the person that got out, and then the person would go back in, and they probably knew much more about this volunteer than need be shared with the whole population. So it was kind of protecting everybody in that situation.
Yeah, it makes sense from a security point of view. Any thoughts on that, Father Dustin?
No, I think that's an excellent model, Sister Maureen, and I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it at the very beginning. Obviously, those that were initially interested in supporting Joseph House are people that have been in prisons and see the realities. And yet at the same time, what I have found already is with some of our volunteers that we are having accompany our residents and participants are those that have never stepped into a prison and had to make a decision whether or not they wanted to get involved with this ministry, having watched Law and Order and all the lockup shows on television. But each time, so far without fail, people that I would never have thought would be interested in this, and for a variety of different reasons, and who had a lot of fears about this type of a work, when they sit down at the kind of individual level and have a conversation or share a meal, some of our now most ardent supporters and volunteers have been those individuals. And it's, to me, that's just opening up the space for that kind of genuine encounter to take place that I can't control. I can't program that. I just have to create the space that's safe for that type of a relationship to emerge.
Great. And speaking of safe spaces, something I was talking to Sister Maureen yesterday, and she mentioned the importance of involving parishes in this work. But I think that's a challenge for us. How do we get our Catholic parishes involved in this work and trained to be really effective in helping people reentry?
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge, but it's a great need. Almost every parish, if you would speak to the pastor, can tell you that they have people in their parish that are in the prisons. And so therefore they should be served as well as people who are coming to church every Sunday there. My hope is to create these little model prison ministry teams in each parish, where you may not have somebody assigned to you to visit yet, but you find 5 or 6 people in that parish who say they're willing to sit down and work on this prison ministry team. And what they do, one looks and goes and finds where the AA-NA meetings are and has that resource ready. Somebody else talks to somebody who owns the 24-hour store or the Dunkin' Donuts or somewhere and says, would you be willing to give somebody a job when they get out? You know, just a beginning job, a startup job. Somebody else that you know that works in counseling centers, would you be able to help somebody get a start? That does parenting, all of those different things that we deal with to help people regain their lives. If you have that team already, then the ideal is I pick up the phone in my office and say, Susie's coming back to your parish. And you say, Sister Maureen, we're all ready. You know, and you come and start visiting her at the prison before 6 months or so before she gets out as that little team of people. And so that when she comes back to the parish, you don't point to her, this is the person who's been in prison, but you just welcome her and try to involve her back into the parish.
Have you had any, what's been your experience working with parishes in terms of training parishioners and pastors to get ready for this kind of work?
Well, it's all been really positive. It's been very positive. It's not formalized like that, but it's in the conversation stage. And we now probably have at least 9 to, I think I counted the other day, about 15 parishes working with us on different levels. So we're getting there. It's just slower than I would like.
Yeah. How about you, Dustin?
Well, I can, again, only echo what Sister Maureen has already said in terms of, to me, when I think of engagement with parishes and kind of breaking down a lot of the walls that already exist. And Tallahassee is an area that's very segregated. The north side is predominantly white and wealthy and middle class, and the south side is predominantly minorities and a lot of poverty. So there's already a lot of walls that are set up in a lot of these communities. But I find that the best way to break some of that down is simply through already those that are volunteering and supporting and have encountered those that we serve here at Joseph House, for them to be able to go back into their men's group or women's group or whatever, ladies circle society, the different Knights of Columbus or whatever is going on in the parishes, and to be able for them to talk about and tell their own stories about the work that they've been doing with Tavares or Quentin or Jonathan or whomever. And when they show that they feel safe and that this is valuable work and a needed ministry, then their friends get involved as well. Maybe not all of them are going to be accompanying and working with our residents, but maybe they're the ones to provide the jobs or to be able to make calls to people that are outside of the parish to see if they can network some of these individuals into their schools or their jobs or whatever. So it really cuts back to that basic kind of social networking that I think parishes are already well poised to do. It's just, let's give them the opportunity.
Okay. I'm really interested in the whole parish idea, though, because one of my experiences here, again, the segregation issue, the differences in class between, say, our suburban parishes and where a lot of our prisoners come from. So just sort of educating and equipping parishioners to be communities that are welcoming and supportive seems like a big part of our work. And yet, as you were saying, Maureen, there's not really anything formalized. Are you aware of anything in the country, anybody doing the kind of work that perhaps has formalized a training program like this?
No, I just keep bringing it up to everybody, and everybody says, "Oh, that's a great idea." So here we are. We're talking to a larger network of people. So contact us and let us know if you're already doing this.
Yeah, well, that's part of what we're trying to do too with the CPMC is in networking, finding out who's doing what, because there's some, like you both are doing amazing work, and we want to let other people know about it. But also people out there who are doing this kind of work, we want to hear from you, so we can share some of the experiences. Because I know, Maureen, you've been doing this particular program since '95.
Right.
And it's innovative in the sense of, especially the idea of having two separate groups of people, you know, the visitors and then the outside, the volunteers and then the visitors separately. I know that in California, we would have to do something similar because of the rules around visiting. I also just think in terms of security and just common sense, it makes sense to keep those two groups distinct. But there is sort of a lack of national sort of standards for training Catholic parishes in how to do this work, even though many parishes would like to be involved.
Right. You know, I was saying I'm trying to set up these model programs in a couple parishes, but then the idea is once we get 3 parishes set up like that, the next like 6 months to a year, they adopt a parish. Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't take long, because now you have 6 parishes. Then when you have the 6 adopt a parish and teach them what they had learned, how they were trained, I just think it would be contagious. Yeah. In a good way.
Kind of like your Read to Me Mommy program that I know right. Copied everywhere. Very simple idea, but brilliant. Somebody asked Maureen, how many people does your program serve overall? And are you able to provide one-to-one matches with volunteers or visitors for each of the women in your program?
Exactly. That's exactly what we do. We everybody that's in our program is matched with one or two aftercare visitors. Sometimes I have aftercare visitors that have a short amount of time, or they're going to be away for a piece of time, and we don't ever want the person coming out of prison to not have someone connected to them that they feel like can call and be a support to them. So sometimes some people have two people. How many people we have? We have hundreds out since '95. And I think we're working with somewhere between 20, 30 people like active right now. And then as they leave, new people come in. Um, we work with each person individually. It's unique to each person. Everybody doesn't need the same thing. So, yeah. So it's not like you'd be in the program, you'd be there for 6 months and then you do this. We follow you right out the door to wherever you're going and whatever program, what home, housing, sober house, you name it. And just stay with you. You're stuck. You've made a friend and you get to keep that friend, which is pretty cool.
It is, it's really important. Dustin, somebody was asking in Florida, how would people in Southern Florida find out about what you're doing up there in the Panhandle?
Well, is this the time to give a shameless plug to our website is one thing, but also certainly, and on the website is a lot of our contact information. And it's interesting that the person raised that question, because so many of the guys that I serve, and that some of our volunteers serve in other prisons here in North Florida, most of them come from the South. So it's kind of top heavy. The state of Florida, we have about over 100,000 incarcerated, probably and that's increasing still. So we have about 100,000 in the state of Florida. In just our diocese, which is from Pensacola to Tallahassee, we have 40,000 incarcerated so it's big industry really here in the Panhandle. But for those that are interested, because I would love to be much more connected with parishes in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Tampa, because so many of the guys that I serve are actually going back into these communities. So to contact, just our website is Joseph House, fully spelled, us.com. So just Google Joseph House, Tallahassee, and something should come up.
Okay. Sister Maureen, somebody asked, does your program get involved in providing housing or helping them find housing?
The last person that I hired on my team, she was hired for that very reason, to find the resources in housing and employment. And she's been with me about a year now. And Carol has gone to many, many of the programs that exist, because we want to know what they're like before we send anybody there, and find out if the sober house is a sober house or just is in name. Yes, so we try our best. Do we have housing? No. Do we know the people who are involved in housing? A lot of them we do know that we would recommend, and a lot we would not recommend.
And what about other sort of immediate needs for women when they're coming out of prison, like the day they're out? What happens? Does one of your volunteers meet them at the gate?
It depends. Again, it depends on them. Some people have their cousin or their mother or somebody meet them. If they don't have a ride, we take them to wherever they're going, and that up here turns into, in Massachusetts, turns into a whole day process, because you not only get out, but then you have to go to parole and meet with them, or you have to go to probation and find out those rules and regulations, and then you have to go to the bank to cash your check, or whatever it is. So there's a lot of stipulations involved. So getting out of prison and somebody picking you up really involves their whole day. Mm-hmm. So yes, we do that. And I see here too, there's also a question about, do you ever tap into Catholic businesses for help with employment? We most definitely do. We follow all the leads of people willing to help with employment and try to match up.
What do you do for actually recruiting volunteers for your programs? Both people coming into the prison as volunteers and people who are coming in or not coming in, but are visitors for the women preparing to reenter. How do you recruit people for that?
Carefully.
Yeah.
People who are aftercare visitors, it's amazing because those who are aftercare visitors tell everybody how wonderful it is to work in that program. And they bring their friends who bring their friends who bring their friends. And so that's really wonderful because the people arrive at our meeting once a month already having a sense of this is something valuable that I might want to invest my time in. And then they sit through that meeting, 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, and then say, yeah, I'm ready. I really want to do this.
Okay. How about you, Dustin?
I think that's the best way is for others to say, come and see. And I think that's what happens most effectively because they've already got a bridge, a personal connection to the ministry. Also, I just might add as being a priest, the power of the pulpit. At times we, fortunately, a few of our parishes in the Panhandle have allowed us to come in and do a mission on a weekend. So taking a gospel, taking a passage, which is not difficult to find, passages that are very pertinent to the work that we're doing, and preaching on it. And that's really, you're opening it up within the context of the liturgy, I think, for it to resonate more deeply for people that have never made the connection between incarceration, prison, and so many of the themes in the scriptures, exile, be it returning exiled, I think is a powerful theme that can resonate in the context of liturgy. So I think the liturgy is also a wonderful opportunity to preach about the need for reentry services.
Okay. Somebody was asking about other aftercare programs such as Delancey Street that started here in San Francisco, and they're all over the country now. I know Salvation Army has a lot of programs, and I worked at a place also in Framingham called the Bridge House for men coming out of prison when I was still in Massachusetts. What's been your experience working and networking with other reentry programs that are maybe not necessarily Catholic, but are doing good work?
It's just having conversations across the country, what's happening in other prisons and if they're being successful with reenter aftercare. Actually, it's the whole aftercare direction is new. It may not feel new to us who have been doing it for a long time, but it really is new in the prison system. And it's kind of jolting because this wonderful new trend to get people out, to help them, to have them be able to begin their life again is it's absolutely where it should be, instead of being a part of a system that, Texas calls the correction system one size fits all. Yeah, in their advertisements, in their programs. And so for us to turn that around, it's a big job. And I'd welcome talking to anybody who's involved in this ministry.
I'll just say, George, here in Tallahassee, fortunately, we have a pretty vibrant kind of reentry communities, and many of them that have just sprung up, including us, really, over the past 2 or 3 years. So we are members of a larger reentry coalition that networks with different social services in Tallahassee. Also, to some extent, networks with the Department of Corrections. But most importantly, it's a way of, many ways, kind of what CPMC is attempting to do, which is networking within the different ministries here in the Tallahassee area. Not only ministries, I should say, but organizations that offer kind of targeted services for those that are formerly incarcerated.
Okay. Well, we're sort of getting close to the end of our time. I'm just wondering if you could maybe talk about what have been the biggest obstacles or challenges that you've faced and overcome, and what's been the greatest reward or blessing from this work for each of you in your own experience?
Yeah, I think my own experience, the biggest challenge has been in talking with the women that we serve. They desperately need counseling and some, one-to-one help, both inside the prison and when they get out, to be able to really grab hold of their life and their struggles and the trauma they've experienced in a way that enables them to pick up and move on. The blessing has been the people. We don't have the formalized parish program that I would like yet, but I've not had anybody in this diocese where I work, when I have picked up the phone to call the parishes, ever refused to talk and to help. So that's just so positive, as well as the people, the aftercare visitors and volunteers. It's a tremendous group of people who really teach me a lot on how to serve God.
Okay. Thank you. What about you, Dustin?
Yeah, well, the greatest obstacle that I experienced in real time, actually this time last year with the first guy that we were working with, coming out of prison, coming out of solitary confinement and back into the community, was finding housing and just knocking on so many different doors, calling so many different apartments and rental places that just said no, 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 for about, I would say about 48 hours, 2 or 3 days, actually, just getting, and watching him hear the no's after time and saying that he would just rather them kind of put handcuffs back on him, send him back to prison. The difficulty in finding housing was certainly the greatest obstacle, but it also, I think, afforded, at least for me, a moment of a great blessing after 3 days of hearing all the no's, to hear one person say yes. And that person being willing to kind of go against, to some degree, aspects of their company policy to get to know the individual that we were trying to connect. And then after that conversation and interview, opened up their doors to having him have housing at their facility. So it's that the goodness of kindness of a stranger in stepping in and being willing to risk something a little bit to make those connections and possibilities. I'll just also quickly add, for us, a great blessing has certainly been our bishop, who has been very supportive, and that has made a world of a difference for us with I would say, the speed in which we've been able to get things up and going here. It means a world when you have a difference when you have community support in the parishes and at the diocesan level as well.
Mm-hmm. And I remember from when I was in Massachusetts, Cardinal O'Malley, was very supportive. So has that been your experience, with the Archdiocese of Boston supporting this work as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Cardinal does come out, and he comes out at least once a year, but he's very, very supportive of our work, and he loves the Aftercare program and talks about it himself at different junctures in some of his own programs.
Great. At the beginning, Father Dustin mentioned the way to contact for more information about his program is to www.josephhouseus.org. Maureen, do you have somebody or a site or a website or a contact that people can direct contact for information?
Sure, it can be, it's mlccsj@aol.com.
Okay. And that's an email address?
It is.
Okay. So you don't have a website yet?
No.
Okay. Good. All right. Any other comments that you would want people to know, material that we haven't perhaps brought up before we sign off?
Well, I often think of that Matthew 25 scripture where we hear, "Come, you whom my Father has blessed." And then we hear, "I was hungry, I was thirsty, I was in prison, and you came to see me," is one of the translations I was reading the other day. And I'm thinking, well, if I come to see somebody, then what am I going to say? "Hi, how are you? How's it going?" But then usually the next sentence is, "What's happening in your life," or "What's happening in my life?" And I think that's where we enter into people's lives. What's happening, but how can we visit again? How can we help you? That's really what this ministry is all about, is reaching out to each other and taking away all those barriers that the media has placed before us. to see each other as these human beings who need each other to help each other.
Yes.
One woman at a time, sort of.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. How about Father Dustin?
I think Sister Maureen's words are good words to end on, that allowing opportunities for people to see one another. And that is, for us, I think that's salvation, you know, that recognition and a seeing of the needs of others, and also oftentimes seeing our own needs in light of their needs. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One more time, somebody was asking about the contact for Joseph House. It's www.josephhouseus, JOSEPHHOUSEUS.org. And also, if people listening to this or watching a recording of it later want information, you can also email us at CPMC, and we can send you more information on this. As we're preparing to finish, I want to thank both of you for both your work, your mentorship, and the example you are in terms of prison ministry, because it's really all about not just people who are just while they're in prison, but helping people to have full lives after the experience of prison is over. And we know 95% of the men and women in prison will get out, but we want to make sure that we offer them something as a way back into the community once they leave. And so both of you have models of work that are really worth copying, and I hope people imitate you and your example. Our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, August 13th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and that will feature Deacon Edgar Farias, who works for the Office of Detention Ministry in Miami, Florida. And the topic of the August 13th webinar will be how parental incarceration harms children and what we can do about it. We will also have the same content the following week on Tuesday, August 20th. However, that webinar will be entirely in Spanish. So the English version will be Tuesday, August 13th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, followed by the Spanish version with Deacon Edgar again, the following Tuesday, August 20th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And I will send out a link for people to register for that. But again, I want to thank both of you for your time, and all of you who've joined us with your questions. A copy of this webinar will be placed in a day or two on our CPMC website, and you can Google us there, Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition, and keep checking us, because we're planning on having our website go live later this summer, and we want to be the go-to place for anybody doing prison ministry in the United States. So thanks again to everyone involved, and have a good and blessed day.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. Yeah.